Doug Williams here in our SNY studios with some breaking news that I'm sure makes Mets fans very happy. Fox Sports' Ken Rosenthal is reporting that Yoenis Cespedes and the Mets have come together on a deal. Here's what we know so far, at least from what Rosenthal is reporting. 4 years, $110 million, a full no-trade clause. It's the largest free agent deal in New York Mets history, and we're happy to have Jim Duquette join us to talk a little bit more about this deal. As we know right now, Jim, what are you hearing and where do we stand? Everything I just said is what we are hearing, but what are you hearing?
Yeah, so I haven't heard too much different other than it's that old proverbial pending a physical, which you always have to be cautious of. But you know that other than the injury that he had during the course of the year, that you don't expect anything there. They know the player, and you expect them to be able to pass. I think all of those things kind of check off. You feel pretty comfortable in that sense. I think the other question, Doug, is there an opt-out in there or not? The big question on that. I thought the no-trade clause is interesting as well, putting a full no-trade in there, also part of the deal. So I think those are the more of the particulars. And if you look at it overall, the 1 year this year with the Mets at 27.5. Add that to the 110. Over a 5-year period, 137.5. That's a pretty big number there for Cespedes.
Yep, and he's getting $27.5 million per year again now, which makes him, other than Miguel Cabrera, the highest annually paid position player in the big leagues. But Jim, you look at this deal, 4 years, $110 million. Already in our offseason coverage here on SNY, we've talked a lot about how we thought maybe that 5th year would be the deal breaker. It turns out that the Mets were able to sign him. Again, we wait to hear about an opt-out, but they were able to sign him 4 years, $110 million. Your initial thoughts on those numbers alone?
Yeah, so a couple things. First off, I think it's certainly in line with what you would expect on a shorter deal, right? The 27.5, so the AAV has to go up. I think, though, there's also a benefit. If you look around at some of these signings, some of these guys who have had qualifying offers attached to them because of the uncertainty with the collective bargaining agreement, you haven't seen any other guys sign yet. And so it's likely where you're seeing some guys sign that don't have the qualifying offer attached to them, or in this particular case, you're going back to signing with your own club. So, there might have been a team or two that would have been willing to go to the 5th year. You don't know that. But because there's uncertainty within the collective bargaining agreement right now, you don't know what you're going to give up. I think a lot of teams are sitting there on the sideline, and so you get the number you're looking for. If you're CAA and Cespedes, then you jump on it.
So, Jim, we've talked a lot about this offseason so far, the fact that Cespedes wanted to sign with the Mets, and the Mets wanted to get it done, but not just get it done this offseason, they wanted to get it done quickly. That's exactly the case. Again, we don't know what's going to happen with the owners. We've talked a lot about that going into the winter meetings this year, but the fact that it's done already, the fact that Cespedes left a possible extra year that he might have been able to get from other teams, does that just show you the mutual admiration between these two, both the Mets organization and Cespedes, that he really wanted to come back, and obviously the Mets realize how important he is to this team?
Well, listen, yeah, I think there's no denying that the Mets understood this year, more than any, how much they needed him, right? We saw a lot more transparency from the front office about their pursuit of him and being more aggressive and out front on that. There's no doubt about that. I think Cespedes, getting an understanding if they wanted him back, and him reaching out to other officials, maybe it wasn't to Sandy, but to other club officials, I think that was a positive too. I think all of those things, the fact that, Cespedes, as you've talked about, Doug, is he's a premium primetime player who thrives in the bigger markets, knowing that, maybe some of those other spots weren't open to him, not in San Francisco, not necessarily in L.A. right now. I think all of those things kind of combine. There's a lot to this, a lot of layers to it, but I do think that being comfortable in this spot, being, part of the team for the last year and a half, I think all of those things combined, I think, help get this thing done.
And moving away specifically from Cespedes for just a second, if I could, the big question, I guess, now is looming, what now? Because that outfield is crowded, Jim. We know that. The Mets dealt with it plenty last year. I'm sure they'd like to give Michael Conforto more playing time, an actual everyday role on this team next year. So we talk about Jay Bruce possibly moving. We've talked about Curtis Granderson possibly moving to make room in that outfield. What do you think the Mets do now, looking ahead to the winter meetings, to try and maybe fill in a spot elsewhere on this club while also making sure that their outfield's a little less crowded?
Yeah, listen, I think now, and the Mets have taken the temperature and also been called by several teams in regards to both Granderson and Bruce. I think there's been plenty of interest in both. The big question will be, which one do they decide to move? I think if we're looking at it realistically, I think Bruce may be the guy that has the lead in terms of the first guy to be traded if they can work out a deal. I think that's going to be the interesting thing now moving forward is if they do move him, and let's say make that assumption that they are able to, then they're able to take the money that they have there and put it into some other relief pitcher. So I would suspect, and usually you don't see the front office get ahead of themselves a little bit. I think you give ownership credit for allowing them to do that, but I will be surprised if they go with that outfield of Granderson, Bruce, and Cespedes at this point if we see that in the spring training. I think one of them, and particularly Bruce, will be traded.
And Jim, does this show you these two moves? If you look at the amount of money they're paying these two guys, Neil Walker and Yoenis Cespedes, it's $17.2 million this year to Neil Walker and the $110 million deal to Yoenis Cespedes. Does this give you an idea that Sandy Alderson's thinking, all right, our young pitchers, granted, we hope they're healthy, but our young pitchers are all going to be there this year. This is our window of opportunity. This is the time in our franchise where we need to spend big to make sure that we capitalize on our chance to possibly win a championship.
Yeah. Listen, the window. There's no doubt the window's now, right? I mean, and I think if you didn't have Walker with the back issue, and you didn't have your pitchers kind of unravel with the injuries, who knows where this team ends up going? And it's remarkable they were able to keep it together and get to the wild card at that point. But I think you have to look at it optimistically and think that hopefully the injuries are behind you with the staff. You're still going to have some issues trying to piece it together, but I think you have to go under that assumption that you have enough depth in the pitching to overcome a couple of injuries, and now you have the basic team back in place, and you make another run at it. And I think the next couple of years, I suspect they're going to certainly be among the front runners in the National League like they have been the last couple of years.